Hi guys. So this is my fourth video. I'm sorry, I know that it's a lot and like I said a bunch of times, I didn't know how else to do it. But this is gonna be the last one. Um, Kind of just going more into it, but also tying everything up at the same time. Um, Going off of where I ended the last video, I was looking at this paragraph right here, where it says, in the South, while tomboyishness may have been acceptable in the young girl at puberty, she was expected to begin the metamorphosis into Southern womanhood. But since Frankie and Mick persevere with masculine appearance, sorry, and behavior, society brands them as freaks. This idea of freakdom is reflected in Mick's older and feminine sister, Etta Kelly's criticism of Mick's persistent masculinity. And then, quote, she says, "It makes me sick to see you in those silly boys' clothes. Someone ought to make you behave. That is, somebody ought to make Mick become a true woman." In The Member of the Wedding, it is Bernice who advises the freakish Frankie to change from being so rough and greedy and big. You ought to fix yourself up in your nice dresses. Going off of what I said in the last video, as it says, it was acceptable to be a tomboy when you're a child, but like I said, the moment they are hitting puberty, I'm sorry, I can't talk today. At the moment they hit puberty, they're expected to become this Southern woman, this Southern belle, someone who wears dresses, someone who is quote unquote pretty, has long hair, makes themselves look presentable and pretty and done up. And that's just not Mick and Frankie. And I mean, they do have their phases in the books, I think. Like I said, when Frankie, she's trying to be more mature and she's like, I want to be F. Jasmine, I want to be Frances. And when Mick has her little prom or her little gathering, she does dress up, she wears a dress, but I think overall it's safe to say these are not girly girls, and I don't think that is going to change with growing up, even when they are. I mean, I know it's just a book, but if you were going to think that much into it and think when Frankie turns 15, 17, 20, will she be the same or will she be different? Will they, as they get older, as they go into high school, maybe will they have, like, the girls that Frankie sees walking by her house, the older girls, the club that she wants to be a part of so bad. It's like maybe an interesting perspective to put on it is like, what about when Mick turns not Mick, Frankie? What about when she turns 16? Maybe she'll want to wear dresses. Maybe she will really want to be kept called Frances. I know that was one of our discussion post questions after watching the movie. I think it was after watching the movie. Was, do you think that this is Frankie's, where the novel ends? Is it permanent? Will she keep changing? Will she stay the same? And I know a lot of us said changing because she changes her name so many times throughout the story. But I think it's interesting to think about changing in terms of tomboyishness. Will she always be a tomboy? Will she always have short hair? Or will she kind of have a realization like, I'm a woman now. I'm entering Southern womanhood. It's time for me to grow up. Like Bernice says, it's time you put on your, my thing keeps lagging, but when Bernice says, it's change from being so rough and greedy and big, you should go put on your dresses. I think it's interesting to just think about, maybe would they just, maybe one day they'll wake up and say, no, I want to wear a dress. I don't personally think it's likely. I feel like that's just who they are, and let them live. It's just like, who cares? Like when her sister goes, it makes me sick to see you in those boys' clothes, like, and when she says that's why society brands them as freaks, and I know that Sarah Gleason White is not necessarily saying that they are freaks. It's what she's explaining, that that's what people think and why they think it. And like I said, I understand the culture, the atmosphere of this time period, of this location, why society would brand them as freaks, but I just personally don't agree with it. That is my final thought, if you guys couldn't already tell. I just think it's sad. Like, who cares? You know, I don't think that they deserve to be branded as freaks. Um, Freakdom, the word that they keep using, it's like so mean. I just think that in today, today's day and age, maybe there would be people that necessarily don't agree with it because there's always going to be those people, but I just like, the majority of people today wouldn't be like, oh my God, they're freaks just because they wear boys' clothes and they have short hair. Um, I thought this, starting this paragraph right here, was something worth talking about, kind of interesting. I kind of already touched a little bit on it, but when it says, for Mick Kelly, it is the loss of her virginity, again conjuring up the image of undeniably staining blood, which she understands as a visible marker of her entry to womanhood. Wondering if anyone can tell that she is no longer a virgin after her first sexual encounter with Harry Minowitz, she asks him, "Tell me, can you look at me and see the difference?" Harry watched her face for a long time and nodded that he could. I think this is interesting because obviously he can't tell the difference. You don't you like, and I think it's kind of not funny, but I guess funny in a way, because I've seen that in other TV shows, like this will happen to girls and then they're like, oh my God, I feel like everyone's looking at me different, like, can you tell? And it's like, no, you can't tell, but I guess you just feel different. And I think for Mick, this was such a big moment. Like I said, she is so young, and the moment that they had by the river, it was weird, it was awkward, and like that's something that we talked about in class. Like it was kind of like they didn't know what they were doing, and I think because of that, I think it highlights their immaturity. But also they are immature, they are young. So, and just the way that she goes, "Tell me, can you see the difference?" And then it says, when Mick goes home to her family, she expected them to move back when they saw her and stand in a circle and look, but they just glanced at her and she just sat down at the table and waited. Nobody noticed her. Eventually, Mick asks Portia if she is able to notice anything different. Um, and like I said, there's obviously no physical differences to her. Just because she had sex with Harry, you wouldn't ever know that just by looking at her. But I think it further highlights just the idea of them of that's just their brand, I guess. Just the immaturity that comes with them, but at the same time they are kids and they are immature, so it makes sense. And then this is gonna be kind of the last paragraph that I'm gonna really go into. It's this one, starting with Frankie, just to bounce off of what I just read about Mick and her sexual experience with Harry. This paragraph kind of just goes further. Another explanation, another example of how they are so similar. It says, Frankie, like Francis, also fails to understand the adult sexuality. The only sex education she receives is when she witnesses the household borders common fit and the unknown sin that Barney McKean had shown her in the McKean's garage. These encounters with sexuality culminate in Frankie's date with the soldier, which goes disastrously wrong when he attempts to rape her upstairs in the Blue Moon Cafe. For Frankie, his unwelcome advance is like a minute in the fair crazy house, or the real Milledgeville. I don't know if I pronounced that right, which leaves disgust in her mouth. Frankie's allusion to the crazy house neatly captures the sexual distress also experienced by Mick and Francis. When they say Francis, they're not talking about her. That was another part up here, but I didn't go into that part. But yeah, going off of this, I feel bad for. Sorry, I wanted to make sure it was recording. I feel bad for Frankie. She is so young. She's not even 13. And you can tell that, well, as it says in this paragraph, she doesn't know a lot about sex. She barely knows about it at all, really. And I think you can kind of tell, I think that's kind of obvious when the soldier, kind of invites her over, and she has no clue what he wants, what he's thinking of doing. And then he attempts to rape her, which is really sad. That you just imagine like a young girl in that situation who has no clue that she didn't know that those were that was his intention going into it. And it like gives you the chills in a way, how she compares it to being in the crazy house at the fair. It's just sad. I think it's kind of scary to look at from that point of view. But I do think, like it says, it neatly captures the sexual distress also experienced by Mick. I think it perfectly captures that. I think, it just goes to show Mick and Kelly, they are very similar. Mick and Frankie, they are very similar. They don't know a lot about this stuff, even though they are emerging women in femininity and womanhood. They're not very experienced. I mean, as they shouldn't be experienced in this kind of stuff at this age. But I think it all just goes further to prove the point that they are immature. They don't know what they're doing. As I've said a bunch of times. But I also don't think that this makes them freaks. Like I said, to kind of just finish this and wrap it all up, this is the last paragraph of this chapter where it says, these small concluding moments of McCullers' novels of adolescence intimate with a gentle optimism that Mick and Frankie will continue to emerge beyond the ending of their narratives. Although the image of the freak is useful in evoking adolescence disease, the ways in which McCullers represents Mick Kelly and Frankie Adams go beyond an enclosed caught identity. As I have shown, the categories of the grotesque and the freak do indeed overlap. I would suggest that the grotesque is an extension of the freak. In the end, the adolescents are then perhaps more properly figures of the grotesque, and consequently point to the possibility of transformation or lines of flight that lie beyond the scope of the figure of the freak. So like I said before, kind of like she says here too, I would like to know if you guys want to write about that. Do you think, for Frankie and for Mick as well, that they will continue to emerge and to grow? I mean, obviously they're going to continue to grow. They're growing up and they're at that age, I feel like, where you're growing more than ever. But kind of like I said before, will they, in terms of gender, in terms of their names, for Frankie, is she going to continue to go by Francis, or is she going to change it to who knows what next? But kind of, I know we already kind of answered that in the discussion post, but I guess just as far as gender and the tomboy thing goes, will they stay that way? Will they change into a more southern feminine woman? Interesting things to think about. Also, my final thought, as I have already said a million times, I would not categorize them as freaks or call them grotesque. I don't think it captures it correctly. I don't think that's the right word. I like I said, I mean, I know I said this a million times, I do get why people would say that. If you're looking at where this takes place and when it takes place, I understand where it was coming from. That's how people were back then. But I just think, obviously, personally, during this day and age, that would never happen. By the vast majority, that would never happen. But it's definitely an interesting thing to think about. I think Mick and Frankie, they are obviously very similar. They would probably be good friends. But my recording is running out of time. So I hope you guys enjoyed listening to this. If you agree, if you disagree, I don't know. But I'm looking forward to seeing your posts. I hope you guys have a good weekend.